Hi everyone and welcome to my studio. My name is Andra and today we're going to make a cute little card for Mother's Day. In pastels we're going to make snowdrops. My reference photo here, which should show up on your screen soon, is from Pixabay, and I've thought it was really neat for Mother's Day, very fitting. We just got rid of so much snow here in Canada, so the snowdrops I thought were a very good fitting subject for Mother's Day, for spring flower. So I'm using here canvas cards from Strathmore. These are, how big are they? 3.5 by 4 7/8. They're very tiny sized cards that have that canvas texture a little bit, and it's nice and cute. And on these guys you can paint with oil, acrylic, or gouache. But we're gonna do pastels, and I'll show you exactly how. Alright, so I hope you have your tea with you. I'm drinking matcha today, this morning. Here's my matcha with a bit of coconut milk. And okay, let's get to it then. Alright, now in order to get my pastel on here, I want to, and for the snowdrops, because they're white, for those petals to really show up, I want to have a base layer that's darker. I'm gonna do that with acrylic, and because the paper is so thin for this guy, I don't want to use water. I don't know how it's going to react with water, so we're going to use pouring medium from Liquitex, and we're gonna make a very thin layer of acrylic here, paint. So I'm gonna use burnt umber from Amsterdam Acrylics. These guys are really quite good, and I don't need a lot because I want there to be more pouring medium than paint, so that it's nice and thin. So I'm gonna get myself a little dollop of paint here and a bunch of this pouring medium. If I can open this up, there you go. And let's see how far that takes us. Okay. Oh, and these cards come with the little envelopes too, so it's really neat for making your own cards and giving them out as gifts. All right, so I'm gonna put this away so I don't get it dirty. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting a bunch of my medium on my brush here and working it into the paint. And see how thin this is, and this is what I want. The burnt umber is quite a warm, earthy color, and that works just fine for our purpose here, to tone the paper. Alright, here we go. Can you see that? You can see that. Okay. So it's going on really quite thin. I'm gonna get more on my brush. All we want to do is tone the paper, so to make sure that the white really shows up. And I'm getting streaks in my with my brush here, but that's okay because we're gonna put a pastels on top anyways, and besides it creates depth and dimension and interest. So you can see the paper does curve a little bit, but not too much. If we were to have used water, that would have buckled a lot more. So I'm glad I didn't use water. We're toning both sides, rather the back and front of the card. The inside is going to be blank for so you can write a nice little message to your mom. I'm a little bit out of view here. Okay. That down. I don't know how much I like this happening here. Smooth it out a bit. Alright, that sounds good. Alright, we're gonna let this dry. It's gonna dry really fast. Like over here is just a little bit tacky already, so it's drying very, very fast. And look at, I still have a bunch of my medium, so I didn't even need as much as I put on. See, you gotta be careful with the medium because you don't need it. It goes a little, goes so much, so, or rather so far. A little goes so far, so you don't need to use too much. All right, so my card is completely dry now to the touch. It's not sticky anymore, so we're gonna go on with our painting, or preparing the surface for the painting. We are going to we're gonna use pastel on both front and back, so we're gonna use clear gesso for that, to prepare the surface. Clear gesso from Liquitex anyways. I've had it from somewhere else that it doesn't do this, but the clear gesso is supposed to have this grainy texture to it, like it's got little like sandpaper almost, and that creates quite a bit of tooth for the pastel to hang on to. And then you can use quite a bit of, or a few layers, whereas with regular paper you can't. Just because the pastel fills up the tooth of the paper that much faster. So I'm gonna pour a little bit of this out. Again, we don't need a bunch, just enough to cover our card. So I poured out about that much, and I'm gonna take my brush that I washed from previous, dab it in, and I'm not liking that. Paper towel is a good idea to have. Okay. So I'm just covering this area, and I'm going in every direction because that's going to create texture for our paper. It doesn't have to be all in one direction, and definitely doesn't have to be the same direction that I put down the tone of the paper earlier. The correct term for that is a glaze, by the way. And we can put a bit more of this on. It's just going to create more texture. So we're okay. We want that texture, and I want to use up my gesso. Again, I put a bit too much on my palette there. This is a very small card. I've never worked this small, and it's definitely an adjustment to the amounts of paint and everything else that I put out. So I'm pretty sure that I'm going to keep doing this. Okay. Alrighty. So we're gonna let this dry completely again to the touch, and then we can get to the pastels finally. Okay. Now my card is very, very dry, and you can tell, I can tell the texture of it on my fingers. It's really quite rough. So I've tried, the operant word being tried, to limit my palette so that, especially because it's such a tiny piece, that you don't want to put in too much. And limiting your palette also works to make the whole piece more cohesive. So these are the colors that I came up with from my stash. They're all different brands, and I know by the feel of them which one is harder and which one is softer. I don't worry about the names of the colors so much. They don't really matter. What matters is the values. That's what's gonna make the piece, the values, not necessarily the colors are matching the colors to the reference photo. We don't need that. We want value contrast, and that's going to pull our picture into focus. All right, so I'm gonna take this, I know to be, what is this, indigo color from Prisma color pastels. Yeah, new pastels from, I think they're called new pastels from Prisma color. It's a harder pastel, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna sketch out where the darkest darks are going to be. We're gonna go from darkest dark to lightest light, and then in the middle, the mid values. Now my main picture is gonna be on this side of the card. This is the front. When you fold it up, this is going to be the front. Okay, but I don't want to leave the back like that, right? To make the front all very nice and pretty and the back not. So I'm going to pretend that my ground and background, so my foreground and background, not the flowers, just the dirt piece, the dirt, well, the earth, stretches over into this side of the card. Okay, it's a little bit tricky. It's not a big deal. Okay, so I know that this is going to be one delineation. This is going to be another delineation right here. And I know I'm gonna have a lot of darks right here. So let's put a bunch on this side as well. And this is where my stalks are gonna come down for the plant. Okay. And there's gonna be something right in the middle here. And these are going to be rocks. I want to do that. And then of course I'm going to have a bunch of dark this way. So we're just going to go into light to that one. I think that's what I want to do. Okay. Now in this flower, coming down here. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at patches of color. I'm not looking so much at what it is that I'm drawing. It has to be a flower, it has to be a petal, it has to be a rock. They're going to look like a petal, like a flower, like a rock at the end because of the play of those patches of color with themselves, with each other. And that's what we want to show. We are representing. Art is representational, unless you want to be very photorealistic, which is not what I'm doing here. It's going to be representational. Okay. Now, just to have an idea of what the stalks are gonna be, I'm gonna take a dark green. This is a very soft, this is Sennelier pastel. It's going to be very nice and soft. And we're going to go all the way to the top. Bring it down. Do not press very hard on these guys because they are very soft. You want to go very, very lightly. And this way. Okay, then of course there's a little guy right here. Okay. Hey. And this is my first time trying the unison pastel, so we'll see how they do. What I do with all my pastels is I take the cover off, break it in half. Okay, so that they're easier to manage. Okay, oops. And then of course your fingers look like this. But that's what painting is all about. Getting messy. Especially pastels. I blew, you shouldn't blow. Do not blow on your piece. You'd rather want to do this. You don't see it. On a piece of paper towel. Do this if you want to get rid of any bits of pastel dust. You don't want to blow because pastels are toxic. You don't want to breathe that in. So don't do what I just did when I blew on it. Okay, let's put in some more dirt. Ooh, this is really neat. And see, you can see the difference between here and let's say over here where I used a new pastel. This has a lot more pigment in it and it's not quite as hard as the new pastels. The new pastels are very hard. The unisons are a mid-hard, mid-soft pastel. So you can really tell the difference. Okay, so I really want this color in here. And if the background is showing, the color of my paper is showing, that's fine. That's going to create more interest. Okay, I want to put in the flowers there first before I do anything more with the background there. Okay. Let me clean my hands because I'm too dirty. These guys almost look like palm trees, just need the little leaves on them. Alright, so rather almost clean. Okay, let's put in those flowers. Now those flowers are not totally and completely white. They have, whenever there's white, it's not actually pure white. There are other colors reflected in it, because if you think about it, white light is a mixture of all the colors in the spectrum. So white is never pure white, it's a mixture of colors. So what I'm seeing in my reference photo now is blue, light blue, some gray, there is a little bit of white, but it's not pure white. Okay, so I'm gonna go in with my purple. This is a bit of a purple. I'll clean it off a bit. It's a very light, you can tell by the color on this paper towel here. It's a very light color, and what I'm looking for is really more of the value of it. It is a bit darker as a color, but light in value. So I'm doing the flower. Wait, it's gonna come over here. So we want this a bit higher up. I keep forgetting that the flower is gonna come down lower, so that I can put my flower right here. I want it to be bigger. And this is, of course, something that happens when you put light over dark. The colors mix. And this is a very soft pastel, and I don't want to push too hard. Not liking this at all. Leaves around here. Hello everyone again. I decided I didn't like those flowers the way they were coming out, so I just erased everything and I'm starting all over again. This sometimes happens when I'm talking while I'm painting or drawing. I don't pay attention to my painting, so a mistake like this would happen. So to start over right now, I'm just reestablishing some of those lines that I need for the background, the foreground, sort of establishing where things are going again. I'm going in for these flowers with white just to block in where that I want that white to be. Even with clear gesso, there's only so much pastel that it can take, so I have to be very careful of how many layers I'm putting on. Those flowers again are not all pure white, and you can't go any lighter than pure white, so you have to be very careful how you use it. I'll be using in here a lighter gray to put in some of those shadows on the flower petals. And all I'm doing is I'm just paying attention to those blocks of colors. I'm not treating them as flowers yet. I'm definitely not treating the whole painting, the whole piece as whole just yet. I'm treating it as patches of color. That way I don't get lost in the details of, oh, that's supposed to be a petal, or that's supposed to be a rock. How do I paint a rock? Those details sort of come together at the end when the eye sort of puts in the missing pieces so that it forms a whole picture. But when I'm painting, I'm definitely just paying attention to blocks of color, to contrast, to values. I need to get my values right. white is not going to show up as bright against a light color. It's going to show up as very, very bright against a dark color. So here I'm going back, and throughout the rest of this piece here, you'll see me going back and forth between lights and darks and middle values. And for the darks, I'm using a few different colors. I have that indigo dark blue that I used at first, and then a dark brown, and I think right now I'm going back to a blue, or it's a very dark green, I can't really tell. It's just very, very dark. And I'm going back and forth between harder pastels and the super soft pastels. Oh, this is a darker green right here. Generally speaking, you want the softer pastels to go on top of the harder ones. Right now, right here, I'm sort of just going by what values I have in my stash and making sure to mix them up. I do tend as a rule to use my Sennelier pastels, the super soft ones, for just the touch-ups at the end, because they lay on very thick and they're super buttery, and so they don't they take up a lot of space on that on the tooth of the paper. It fills the tooth of the paper very fast, so that's why you'd want a harder pastel for the sketching part, for the initial layers, and then the softer pastels on top. I'm redefining the stalks of the plants here, layering in some green. For example, this green is a harder pastel. However, I don't have that particular green in a smoother, softer pastel, so I use what I have. The amount of pressure you're putting on the pastel also matters. A lighter pressure at the beginning, heavier pressure towards the end for sort of just finishing touches, because with a harder stroke, heavier stroke, more of that pastel gets put on the paper and it fills the tooth of that paper. So you really have to be very aware of the tooth of the paper, how much you're getting on. You'll be able to tell when the pastel sort of just sits on top and it doesn't quite grab onto the paper, or when it just doesn't want to go on anymore. It just scraps at the color underneath and it just won't lay, and that's how you know that you have way too many layers on there. So a way to rectify that would be to use a spray fixative and then go back in for those finishing touches. I'm not going to use a spray right here for this piece. I'll be able to finish it up just fine, but I am very, very careful of how much pastel I'm putting on, how many layers, how thick the layers are. So now I'm going into work on the background of those flowers, or the ground that the snowdrops are on, and some of the background forest. I am moving away from the photograph I was using as a reference quite a bit. I'm sort of starting to create my own background that I feel for this piece, and that's the important thing too. You're interpreting the photograph, and that means you gotta have to let the painting speak for itself. You're going with the flow, and to be very honest, that flow is hard to achieve when I'm focusing on explaining my every move. Hence the voiceover tends to be a little bit easier. I'm explaining the process after the fact. So I'm layering in some lighter colors. Those are going to be my rocks on the left hand side there, and I laid in some of those darker spots where there's going to be shadows, very heavy shadows, or just the color of the rock, and layering some of the lighter portions of those rocks on top or around it. I'm adding in a little bit of sunlight where it starts to hit some elements in the painting. And because I don't have this card taped and it's not sitting on a easel whatsoever, I have to get rid of some of that dust that forms when as I'm using the pastel, so I keep shaking off that dust on a piece of paper towel there. So in with that dark brown, I'm looking at some of that ground cover or color as well, trying to fill in some of those gaps for those flowers there. Using more than one dark value color helps to create layers. When you're looking at the ground in real life, it's not just one color all throughout. It's got a few different colors in there, different soils, different roots, whatever's happening in the ground. It's not just one bland color. So when you're painting the ground, you have to allow for some of that natural phenomenon to happen as well. So what I've done at the beginning there, you've seen I tinted the card, the paper, with a brown, light brown, that is going to be showing up throughout all these layers of pastel here and there in tiny little spots. And I want that because it adds to the texture of the ground. I've decided for the very background in the distance, I wanted something a bit more fuzzy, out of focus background. I wanted the foreground, the ground where the flowers are at, to be the center of the piece, to have the most detail to show up the most. So that means in the background it needs to be less detail, darker, less contrast in values, not as many values. So I'll be smoothing stuff out with my fingers in the background there. And I've decided to have the trunks of trees in the forest showing. So I'm working towards establishing that. What I like about pastels is that you can mix the colors straight on the paper just by layering them and then smudging them, and that changes the color that you're working with. So it's really quite easy to do that. For as small as this card is, there's quite a bit of puttering around, trying to get detail, trying to get layers. I'm also establishing depth there. The trunk on the left hand side of this back piece, the left hand piece of the card there, this trunk here is a little bit closer to us, so the horizon is lower. The other trunk to the right of it, on that side of the card, is a little bit further away. So I dropped that horizon a little bit lower on the left hand side to indicate that the trunk is closer to us, and that gave it a very nice little depth of field there. So I'm moving towards final details, and I'm using that light cream color to add spots here and there where the sun is hitting the ground or the flowers or the stalks, the plant in general. Making sure I touch up those rocks as well. And I do have to clean my pastel here ever so often because it's just picking up the layer underneath and it's getting it dirty. We're just adding bits of dried grass that can be growing in between those rocks and around the floor of the forest. And we're nearly just done. I hope you guys have liked this video, and please do hit the like button and subscribe for more videos. I hope to have a lot more pastel videos and acrylic videos, oil. I'm also dabbling into watercolor, so I'd like to have some of those coming up at some point. Alright, so that's about it for me, you guys. I wish everyone a happy Mother's Day, and hopefully this gives you an idea of something you can do for your mom as a gift, a handmade card. Moms usually tend to like that. It's something special, it comes from your heart, and it's made by you.